We're now going to move to the rather interesting question of truth. And we have to ask ourselves, what is truth? It's a question which seems to have rattled down through the history of human society almost for as long as we've had the written history. What we want to do now is really look at some simple observations that we can make about the question of, well, statements and reality and the notion of truth. If we see something and we take it into our minds, so we see something in reality, we'll call it an apple hanging in a tree, we take into our mind an idea of the apple in the tree, and we can say, there is an apple in the tree. We're making a statement. Where actually, that statement is what, formally speaking, is a metaphysical statement or a judgment. Apples and trees are concepts, and linking them together by saying there is an apple in the tree is simply more than stating something about society, about the way that the world is. Does the statement accurately map reality? Well, that's really the question, isn't it? Is there an apple in the tree or not? Well, if there is an apple in the tree, we would say it's true. And that statement, the apple is in the tree, is a true statement to the extent that it conforms with reality. Let's look at that a little bit further. We can understand truth as the accuracy that a statement maps reality. In the former example, we're looking at the idea that somebody had in their mind, how that mapped, how that conformed to reality. We can say that our memory is something like a map, and the quality of that map is an indication of the truth of the statement, the idea that it holds. This tends to be linked in terms of time and space. Right now you are watching or listening to a presentation on an idea which is very important when we're understanding ethics. That appears to be a true statement. In 10 minutes' time or an hour's time, you may be doing something else. So right now, in this place and at this time, the reality is that you're listening to some lecture or rabbit on about truth and statement and things. When we look at other maps, we can get a bit of an idea of what this mapping thing means. Road maps are simply representation of the physical layout of our road system as patterns of ink on paper. Other types of maps are heights as contour lines or other things. It always requires an intellect to understand a map because it's connecting two different types of understanding. And the quality of that connection is really what truth is all about. We can test the quality of the map by looking at how well the representation sort of transfers into the reality. Is it proportioned? A badly proportioned map is not very much use as a map at all. Ideally, there should be a one-to-one relationship, what in mathematics is referred to as an isomorphism, between the representation, the statement, the idea, and the reality that it's meant to represent. The map should be trustworthy. Here we're getting a word which we came back right at the beginning of our waltz through ethics. A good map is a replication of the formal relationships. The form of the map, the shape of the roads represented on paper, conforms to the shape of the roads in reality. Let's look at the objectivity of maps. A good map is good because of what it is, not because of the person who reads it. Someone gets mixed up when they read the map. Well, is that the map's fault? The map is true whether or not someone understands it or not. So you do need a certain capacity in the person who is actually using the information. Sometimes when we're dealing with things a little bit more complex than pictures of apples, we find that there are things like cultural biases, education and physical abilities which will affect that. But remember, none of that really affects the quality of the map if we're talking about a physical map. It can influence the way that the idea, the physical map in the tree, actually gets into the mind of our listener. If they only speak French and we only speak German, then we're going to have a bit of a problem. Some people object that while I might have a map, a statement, maybe a photograph of the apple in the tree, what happens when we have change? Well, fairly simply, while the map may have been true at a particular time and place, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be true at all times and all places. And so change is accommodated within truth once we realise that the truth of an objective statement about the world is in some way, constrained by the time. It all comes back to the idea of this objective quality. By objective, I mean it's not something that you make or decide yourself. It's something which is simply in the thing itself. We find it, we don't make it. To understand truth, we can look at other ways where this word truth is used. When an electrician talks of a true meter, what they're saying is that they have a measuring device that gives a reading that conforms in some ways to some reference quantity. And so it means that there is something about the electrical potential of what they're observing, say in a voltmeter, that conforms with the movement of a mechanical needle on a dial. It's really mapping the idea of electrical potential, which is an observable physical thing. You can start cars with it and you can do all sorts of wonderful things with electricity, but it's being mapped into the physical movement of the true meter. And so truth for a meter is its ability to physically represent some other quality. It could be temperature, it could be whatever. Oddly enough, you can take the observations of your meter and then maybe draw a picture or write a number. You know, the battery has got 12 volts in it, and you can write 12V there, and that will be a true representation of the circumstance of the battery. In all cases, we're using the concept of truth, and in all cases, it's because truth is this mapping, this accurate transference from a physical fact to some sort of an idea, or in this case, a different movement, which has really got nothing to do with voltage. There are other instances where we use the notion of truth. Carpenters talk about true timber. This photograph is meant to represent a twisted beam, one which is not true. If a carpenter looks for a piece of timber to build something with, they're looking for something which has got nice straight lines, rectangular edges, and so on, and right angle bends. You can see that this piece of timber has got a bit of a twist in it. It's not true. What is the carpenter referring to when he says he's got a true piece of timber? It's not one that doesn't tell lies. It means it's one where the physical stuff of the wood conforms to a geometrical idea, which is straight lines and right angles. So it's a mapping from the physical material of the timber to a geometrical concept. It's also objective. Again, it's not something that the carpenter makes the piece of timber true. He simply finds it true. So the answer to the question of what is truth is that it's an answer. Truth is the answer to a test of validity. Is the representation an accurate map of the form it is meant to replicate? Is the representation proportional to the original? And ultimately, truth is found. It's not made. It doesn't take us away from the possibilities that some things are subjective observations. I might feel like a cup of coffee right now. Other people might feel like a cup of tea. Is one true and one false? Not really. They're simply a true statement of my feelings at the time. That's quite different to saying, is coffee a beverage made on hot water? Well, it's hard to make it on anything else. Maybe you can have milk coffee or something, I don't know. But I think you can see what I'm getting to. Let's move to definitions of truth. Truth is an accurate mapping of one presentation of a form to another. We can say that truth is the conformity of a statement with reality. And we can talk about the correspondence of mind with reality. All of these are really saying the same thing. The tightest definition that tends to be used in classical thought is that truth is the conformity of a statement with reality. Now, if you dwell on this, you can certainly see that truth is not something that we make. It's not something which is subjective. Truth is not in the eye of the beholder. The beholder might be able to recognize truth, but the truth is something else.